to just chat with you
Okay.
a little bit about your family and the new distiller that you guys opened up, I guess, last year, and how that's
Yeah,
gone
yeah,
so far.
yeah. Look, absolutely. For ourselves, we've been involved in whiskey now for a long time as a
Mm-hmm.
family. So we grew up, myself and my brother, in a my dad set up the first distillery in Ireland, first new independent anyway, for about 100 years back in the 80s. So we grew up in it, and so we've seen a lot of transition in the whiskey world, not just in Irish,
Right.
but um, we've seen obviously the US is leading a huge growth path for brown spirits in general. Bourbon being one that's on fire, but also Irish whiskey.
Right.
So I think for ourselves, we always had a passion to try and go back into the city centre in Dublin, where the family first started distilling. We'd be the first new distillery here in Dublin for God, probably 125 years.
Yeah, I
So
read that. That's great.
yeah, yeah. The only ones crazy enough to build a distillery in a city, But
Right.
Irish whiskey's undergoing a bit of a renaissance at the moment. It's dominated by the big companies, probably like the drinks business in general. Pernod own a lot of the big Irish brands like
Mm-hmm.
Jameson and things like that, and they've done a great job at establishing interest in a mass market way like that we was as a small company could never do.
Right.
And I think with ourselves, we always felt that there was a role to play for urban distilling, because Dublin used to be the epicenter for whiskey production going back probably 100, 125 years ago. All the big
Mm-hmm.
distilleries were in the city, and we had alone in this one area where we're based about 37 separate distilleries. There was huge variation in how the whiskey was made, but also the scale of it. There were some of the world's biggest distilleries based in the city, and our family had a role to play in that. And all of that had imploded. All of that had gone. Irish whiskey about 150 years ago was biggest selling brown spirit in the world. 100 and about 150 years ago, we sold 60% of the world's brown spirit, and there was in Ireland alone probably close to 100 distilleries.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it was huge. And Scotch was still a very, very small domestic business at
Yeah.
that time, whereas Irish whiskey was the go-to, and it was always referred to as a more mellow spirit, just due to our crappy climate,
Right.
our rainy climate. It's never too hot, never too cold. So in the wood, it breathes very consistently. So just a little bit softer and not as heavy as some of the Highland malts.
Right.
And what happened was a few things. There was innovations in how whiskey was made. So column distillation or rectifiers came out, and the remaining distillers in Ireland didn't react to new technology, and they said all Irish whiskey should be made in pot stills, which again, like every incumbent, they always think their technology is the right technology. And
Mm-hmm.
the Scottish guys saw the benefits, or the economic benefits anyway, in blending, which is quite ironic considering the way in which Irish whiskey went. But what happened was, right around that time, religion got involved in alcohol, the purist movement, and they decided that alcohol was bad and everyone
Mm-hmm.
was out getting too drunk. So prohibition happened in the US, but the sort of, I suppose, the first nail in the coffin for Irish whiskey was the new technology, and they didn't react to the new technology. But prohibition blocked a huge export for Irish whiskey, which was the US. But also in prohibition, some bootleggers bootlegged a lot of, like, people didn't give up boozing during the prohibition. It was they just did different ways in which they did it. So they bootlegged a lot of whiskey from Canada with Irish names on it,
Oh, from
and it
Canada.
killed a few people, and that had a really bad negative effect on
Wow.
perception of Irish whiskey. There's a lot of rumors that went around that it was JFK's dad, but I don't know whether that was it's down to Al Capone in New York. But
Yeah.
never let the truth get in the way of a good story, they say in Ireland. But also, Ireland had its fight for independence then, probably about 10, 15 years after. And what happened was the British Empire then closed off all of its export routes in the United Kingdom. So over the space
Okay.
of 30, 40 years, we lost our two huge export markets. And what Scottish distilleries started to do was buy up old Irish distilleries and shut them down. So we went from 1% of the world whiskey market, or sorry, 60% of the world whiskey market down to just 1%.
Wow.
And a lot of the distillers were forced to group together in Ireland to make one distillery making everything. And they were forced to move from places like Dublin, the city, down to a place in Middleton and Cork, which made this monopoly called Irish Distillers, which subsequently turned out to be Pernod. And so we went from 60% of the world whiskey market to just 1%. When my dad set up in the 80s, most Irish whiskey was being consumed in Irish coffee, and it was very domestic focused, and also really focused on kind of the paddy whackery side of things. It wasn't in any way presenting itself as a premium spirit. So when he set up in the 80s, we set about trying to innovate, trying to do things in a different way, and we grew up in that environment. So Irish whiskey has undergone a huge implosion, but is undergoing a huge growth rate again.
Right.
So we're only still about 5-6% of the world whiskey market, but growing double digit everywhere, and the US leading the charge. The US grew, I think, across all states in the US by double-digit growth last year for Irish whiskey. And it's gone completely full circle with younger people interested in it. It's become much more stylish than when my dad first started. It was very paddy whackery. It was the old man in the paddy hat. And where we've seen the opportunity is for every category they need a big market leader. So the bigger company like Pernod, and then Diageo came in with Bushmills in 2005. That actually changed this year to Jose Cuervo own Bushmills. They're trading obviously different things. Grant's own Tullamore Dew, and Beam Suntory bought my father's our former family distillery, which really gave us the impetus to go and set up the family distillery in the city centre. And so myself and my brother took a lot of product with us, casks, and what we've been doing as we were getting the distillery up and running, we've been innovating on cask maturation. Now that we're back into production here in Dublin, we're able to innovate on the mash. So we're doing lots of variations in terms of malted and unmalted barley. We're doing single malts. We're doing different things. But core to our focus is being an independent, family-owned company. The only way in which we can survive is to constantly be innovating and adding, and not trying to do what the bigger companies do, and try to excite people on a liquid basis, and try and innovate from things that we saw worked in other categories like small batch bourbons, or even what's happened in other things like some of the innovations in single malt Scotch, or even looking at other things like craft beer, some of the stuff that they've done, which has excited us, and really try and be looking forward instead of backwards in Irish whiskey. A lot of Irish brands would always look backwards, and say the good old days, and what we're saying is, well, look, we have heritage, we have history, but what are we doing now? And let's try and do products that appeal to, let's try and take some risks and innovate and do things that excite us, and hopefully maybe present Irish whiskey in a different way.
Okay. Well, great. So, with that in mind, who would you say is your biggest target? Are you looking for more European consumption, or trying to grow in the American market as well?
So a lot of it would be where the growth is coming for Irish whiskey would be in the US. It's a demographic, it's a younger demographic who are drinking a lot of Irish whiskey. For us, our target would be kind of 25 to 35, both male and female, who may like a certain style of whiskey, be it American or Irish, and are looking just to take a little bit more of a graduation up. So not alienate what they like about the base spirit, which is that accessibility, but just dial up taste profiles, dial up the strength. We do everything at 92 proof, so we don't have to chill filter. Dial up things with different wood treatments or cast treatments that we've really seen work in other categories, but had never really been done in Irish whiskey.